Hey, welcome back to our discussion of Othello. This is Othello Act 2. Now, you see that there's two eyes there in Act 2. And those two eyes just mean the number 2 in Roman numerals. Aren't you glad that the Muslims invented mathematics with a 0 to 10 process? Because if not, it would be very difficult. You could have something like V times V equals 25. When I was growing up, the only clock in my house was a clock with Roman numerals. So it would be I, 2 I's, 3 I's for 3 o'clock, and then it would be a V, I in front of the V, and then it would be a V, and then it would be a V with another I in front of it. Can you imagine? Very, very difficult. All right, so in this act, we're going to see Iago, who is the villain. He's going to show us more of his character, or lack thereof. We're also going to see how he embodies all of the 7 deadly sins. And the 7 deadly sins are pride, envy, gluttony, greed, lust, and sloth. Okay. So, make sure you take down notes on the 7 deadly sins. Pope Gregory, back in 590, so that's what, 1400 years ago, came up with this list. And what this list is, let me see if you can see it. Yep, you can see it. This is what I call proto-psychology. Now, this idea, even though England in the time of Shakespeare was Protestant, they'd protested and broken away because King Henry VIII decided to steal all of the Catholic Church's property and make himself richer, so that whenever anyone gave anything to God, it went into his own bank account. Can you imagine that? Well, we still see that today with some ministers. Pride, envy, gluttony, greed, lust, and sloth. Pride means hubris. Envy, of course you know what envy is. Gluttony can have to do with food, but it can also have to do with wanting to consume too much of anything, such as power. Greed, which you understand. Lust, and sloth. And sloth is being lazy. And so Iago is going to encompass all these 7 deadly sins, and he's going to use his friend, Rodrigo, in order to accommodate himself and justify his actions. Now, I want you to take note of, we have 7 deadly sins, but we also have 7 virtues. Now, by proto-psychology, what I mean is that this is an early way of people figuring out or trying to figure out what the motivations of different people are. And so Freud who is the father of modern psychology, Sigmund Freud, he published his first work in 1896, which is a long time after this play was written. And he has his own ideas, but by proto-psychology, I mean first psychology. And it's a way of understanding people's behavior, what motivates them, why they do what they do. And Iago is the embodiment of all of the 7 deadly sins. This is opposed to the 7 virtues, which have to do with charity, chastity, diligence, humility, kindness, patience, and temperance. Now, as you see that list of virtues, obviously charity means helping out people when they need help. Chastity has to do with not running a reign or running a riot with sexual desire. It's the opposite of lust. Charity is the opposite of greed. Diligence is the opposite of sloth. Humility is the opposite of pride. Kindness is the opposite of envy. Temperance is the opposite of lust. And patience is the opposite of greed. Which character in this play embodies, because I already told you, Iago embodies the 7 deadly sins in this proto-psychology, trying to understand why people do what they do. Which other character in the play embodies the 7 virtues? And that person is the young woman, the new bride, Desdemona. So in this beginning of this second act, we have the announcement that there was a storm. A battle has already taken place because remember, Othello had already gone off to fight off the Ottoman incursion. And people are waiting to see what the results of that battle was. And different ships are showing up at different times. And so the play says on line 20 in the play, in this act, our wars are done. A gentleman shows up and says that, gentleman 3. And then Michael Cassio or Cassio, is topped up, who is the first lieutenant for Othello. And his name is a little bit ironic because Michael is the archangel of righteousness, the right hand of God to slay the evildoers. And Cassio comes into the play on line 33, and the third gentleman says, he looks sadly. He looks sadly, and he prays for the Moor to be safe. Why? Because his ship was able to get back to shore before Othello's ship has gotten back, and there's been a huge storm that ended up wiping out the Ottoman incursion. And so we have Cassio, or Michael Cassio, praying for the well-being of Othello. He looks sadly and prays the Moor be safe, for they were parted with foul and violent tempest. A tempest is a storm, and if you live here in Florida, you understand what storms look like. You can't control a storm. And then Montano ends up being a testifier towards Othello. Pray heaven he be safe, for I have served him, and the man commands like a full soldier. So here we have Othello being described. As a full soldier. And many of you have family members who've served in the military, and you can think about what that might mean to be a full soldier. Not foolish, not a sucker, but somebody who understands what it is to sacrifice for the cause that they are in. And then Montano also calls Othello brave. Cassio arrives, and his first thing is to say a prayer about Othello. In line 43, thank you, the valiant of this warlike island, that so approved the Moor. Let the heavens give him defense against the elements, for I have lost him on this dangerous sea. So he prays again, right? And Montano asks, is he well shipped? His bark, his boat, is stoutly timbered, and this is line 48, and his pilot, meaning the captain of it, the person who drives the ship, a very expert and approved allowance. Therefore my hopes not surfeited to death stand in bold cure. And because he's so well equipped, I'm hoping he doesn't die. And you have a messenger off stage saying, a sail! A sail! So we're waiting for him to get back too. But no, it's not Othello's ship that's getting back. It is Iago coming back. And Iago hasn't been participating in this battle. He's been given the stewardship of taking care of Othello's wife, Desdemona, and now he is arriving. And we have a gunshot that happens in order to announce the sale. Which is a way of Shakespeare using theatricality. Imagine if you're sitting inside the theater where Shakespeare did this play. You're watching people talk, and then you're going to sit up. And of course, what they did is they used muskets without bullets. And so you hear the gunshot fire, and it's loud. If any of you are familiar with black powder, we're talking about weapons that are very big caliber and very, very loud. And Shakespeare wants to wake the audience up so that they pay attention. And of course, we have someone on stage saying, in line 57, they do discharge their shot of courtesy, our friends at least. They're just letting us know that it's friends, because they don't have telephones, and they don't have satellite, and they don't have the internet. And Cassio says to the gentleman, I pray you, sir, go forth and give us truth, 'tis that it is arrived. So who is it that's arrived? And the second gentleman says, I shall. And Montano says, in the side talk, but good lieutenant, is your general wived? Is Othello wived? Can you imagine? I mean, maybe you're wived if you're listening to me, or maybe you're husbanded. But this second gentleman is asking about the marital status of Othello, which has nothing to do with the plot or with the action that's taken place. Who would care whether a general is married or not married? But the plot of this play has everything to do with his marriage, because Iago is going to destroy this marriage. And Cassio says, most fortunately, he has achieved and made the paragon's description in wild fame, one that excels the quirks of blazoning pens. So, here we have Cassio vouching for not only his general, but also Desdemona. And she is so perfect. She is a paragon. And that's what that word means. She is a paragon that would make it hard for anybody to write about her, because she's almost like a god. Because she embodies the 7 virtues. Later on, in line 76, Cassio calls her divine. And divine is a fancy word that means godlike. Now, if you're one of my public speaking students who I've told not to touch her face, I will tell you that right now it's probably about 100 degrees out here on my porch. And so I'm just wiping the sweat away from my face so that I can continue to talk to you. And then Montano asks him, what is she? And Cassio says that she is the captain of our captain. Most of you probably have heard the phrase that behind every great man there is a woman. And this is the tradition of misogyny, because of course the woman can't be ahead. She has to be behind the man. And she is called the captain of our captain, meaning that she rules Othello. And then Cassio wishes that once Othello gets back, that Othello make love's quick pants. In the arms, in Desdemona's arms. meaning that Cassio is wishing his general, where he's the first lieutenant, that he gets home and he gets to make love with his wife. Make love's quick pants. All right, and now, because Iago has been keeping track of Desdemona, or protecting her, they now enter the scene. And Cassio also describes Desdemona as the riches, as though Othello has been out pirating. But this harkens back to the whole tradition of misogyny, which teaches men to believe that women are property. So she's the riches. The riches of the ship is come on shore, and he tells people, get on your knees before her like she's a goddess. And he says to Desdemona in line 85, hail to thee, lady, and the grace of heaven before, behind, and on every hand, and will thee around. So he blesses, Cassio blesses Desdemona, and she says, thank you, valiant Cassio. What can you tell me about my lord, my husband? He's not arrived, nor know I aught, but he's well, and he'll be shortly here. And she talks about how she's afraid for his life. I fear, how did you lose his company? And Cassio says, the great storm. And so in this context, we have Othello sailing into the ocean to protect Venice, Italy, from the great storm of battle. But really what we have brewing here is a great storm inside of a relationship. So the storm, even though Othello is going to get back safely, I hate to spoil that for you, there's going to be a bigger storm in his personal life. Here we have another gunshot, which is the theatricality of Shakespeare. In case the audience isn't following it, you hear a people are like, oh. And then there's the announcement that there's another sail of a ship that's been sighted, and it's coming in. And Cassio is greeting the wife of Iago, Emilia, and asks permission in order to kiss her on the cheek. Now, in U.S. culture, kiss on the cheek, people don't do that. But throughout the Catholic world, people do that. You go down to South America, women and men kiss each other on the cheek even when they don't know each other. It's an air kiss. Or if you really know the person, you kiss them. Sometimes it's on one cheek, sometimes both. But Cassio asks Iago's permission and says, this is my training, is that I kiss people. And that was very traditional. It doesn't mean that I want to be with you or sleep with you. And he says in line about 99, this is a show of courtesy, and then he kisses Emilia. And Iago says, and now we find Iago and his misogyny. Because what Iago is going to do right after, Cassio has been very courteous and very kind to his wife, is for Iago to complain. Because Iago, lo and behold, is a misogynist, which means he hates women. And Iago says, Sir, would she give you so much for her lips as of her tongue she often bestows on me, and you would have enough. So we have Iago turning this common greeting into something grotesque. I wish you'd give you, if you had her lips, I wish you'd give her more of your, she would give you more of her tongue, which means speaking. Which means that Iago wishes that his wife never spoke. Because it's hard to be married to a woman who speaks. For Iago, apparently. And Desdemona says, but she doesn't speak a lot. Alas, she has no speech. So she defends Emilia, and Iago says, really too much speech. I find it still when I have to listen to sleep. I fall asleep listening to her talk so much. She puts her tongue a little in her heart and chides with thinking. So obviously Emilia makes Iago feel guilty. And Emilia, the wife of Iago, stands up for herself. She's already had Desdemona stand up for her. And Emilia now stands up for herself and says, you have little cause to say so. And that's in line about 108. She's not a chatterbox. And she's calling her husband out on it. And Iago says, come on. You are a picture out of doors, bells in your parlors, wild cats in your kitchens, saints in your injuries, devils being offended, prayers in your house where I read, and housewives in your bed. And he's saying you to Emilia, but he's talking about all women. So he says to his own wife that she and women like her who are married are nothing but hussies, are nothing but prostitutes in men's beds. And Desdemona corrects him, fie upon thee, slanderer. So she calls him out again and stands up for Emilia. And Iago says, it's true, or else I'm a Muslim, or a Turk in the text. So he believes that women who are married are sleeping around all the time. And Emilia says, you will not write my praise. And this is how Shakespeare brings in the idea of writing into all of his plays. And in this instance specifically, there's a long, long tradition of poets writing about their love. And his wife says, I would never have you write my praise or write about me. And Iago says, no, I won't. So if you go over to the next sentence, Desdemona says, what would you write about me if you praised me? And Iago's like, well, I wouldn't want to do that. And Desdemona says, assay, which means try. Try, and let's see. Okay, madam. And Desdemona says, how would you praise me again? And Iago says, I'm thinking about it, but indeed my invention comes from my pate as birdlime does from frieze. It plucks out brains and all. But my muse abhors, meaning, I'm trying to think of something. And now here is how he praises Desdemona. And thus she is delivered. If she be fair and wise, fairness and wit, the one is for use, the other useth it. So, if a woman is beautiful, like Desdemona is, men should use her. And not just that men should use her, she is using men. And she says, well, what if she's black and witty? Or, I mean, what if she's a brunette? Because Desdemona is a brunette. And witty is smart, right? If she be black and there to have a wit, if she's brunette and smart, she'll find a white that shall her blackness fit. So if you're a brunette, make sure you marry or sleep with somebody who is white. And Desdemona says, worse and worse. And Iago's wife says, how about if fair and foolish? So if you're beautiful and not smart. And Iago says, she never yet was foolish that was fair. So no beautiful lady's ever been dumb and beautiful. For even her folly helped her to an heir. So even dumb, beautiful women even dumb, beautiful women reproduce. They give birth to an heir. And Desdemona calls him out and says, this is what people say in bars. And Iago says in line 140, there's none so foul and foolish thereunto, but does foul pranks which fair and wise ones do. So there's nobody who's so disgusting and beautiful who doesn't use her looks to manipulate. And Desdemona calls him out and says, oh, heavy ignorance. You praise the worst best, but what praise could you bestow on a deserving woman? And Iago goes on in lines 145 onward. She that was ever beautiful, fair, and never proud, had tongue at will, and yet was never loud, so make sure that women shut up, never lacked gold, and yet went never gay. So, if you're beautiful and you shut up, you'll have riches, but you won't be happy. Fled from a wish, and yet said, now I may, and she that being angered, her revenge being nigh, bade her wrong stay and her displeasure fly. So if she gets pissed off, even though she's not smart, and she's beautiful and has riches, she that in wisdom was never so frail to change the cod's head for the salmon's tail, she that could think and never disclosed her mind, she sees suitors following and not look behind. She was a white, if ever white were, to do what? To suckle fools and chronicle small beer. So this is what all women do, regardless of whether they're smart and beautiful or they're ugly and smart. All their destination is to suckle fools, to nurse babies. Now I've watched my wife nurse my 3 babies, and there is nothing foolish in that. And my children are not fools either. But that's Iago's misogyny about women. And small beer is, you have to just keep track of details, basically. And then Desdemona, whose mouth is speaking, calls him lame and impotent. Lame and impotent. So he's wounded and he can't get it up. He has ED, apparently, is what she's saying to him. It's an insult. And then she tells Emilia, do not learn from your husband, and turns to Cassio, Michael the archangel, and says, is he not a most profane and liberal counselor? And Cassio is standing up for Iago, because Cassio doesn't realize the extent of Iago's corruption. And Cassio says, he speaks home, meaning he talks like a hick, but you should listen to him. He just doesn't understand what he's saying. Well, that's a defense, ignorance, I guess. You may relish him more in the soldier than in the scholar. So he's a better soldier than he is smart. Which is kind of a dick, right? But still standing up for him. And then Iago turns to the audience and does an aside, which is a theatrical technique that Shakespeare developed so we can see inside somebody's head. And then he turns and he's watching the interaction between Cassio and Desdemona. He takes her by the palm. Aye, well said. Whisper, with as little a web as this I will ensnare a great fly as Cassio. So now Cassio has become a fly. Iago is the web spinner, the spider, who is going to eat him up. Oh, I smile upon her. Do it. I will give thee in thine own courtship. You say true? 'Tis no, indeed. If such trick as these strip you out of your lieutenantry, meaning I'm going to become the lieutenant instead of you, it had been better you had not kissed your 3 fingers so oft. So how many of you have ever kissed 3 fingers and sent them back to the person you were kissing because you weren't up close? Very good. Well kissed. In excellent courtesy. 'Tis so indeed. You again, to your fingers, to your lip? Were they clyster pipes for your sake? And then we have Shakespeare interrupting it once again with the audience with a trumpet playing. And it's the Moor. I know his trumpet. And then we're back in real action instead of Iago only talking to the audience and trying to begin his plan of Cassio being the one who is going to betray Othello and Othello's wife, Desdemona, when they are just exchanging pleasantries. Now, some of you may have been in relationships like that, where you go to the grocery store and you get home and the person says to you, why did it take so long? What have you been doing? And to that, I would say, or why were you talking to him like that? To that, I would say that that person who is accusing you of infidelity is admitting his or her own infidelity.
Excuse me.
Because if you haven't been unfaithful, why would you be accused of it in the first place? Why? Because that person who is accusing you is totally unfaithful. And Iago certainly is not faithful to his wife Emilia. So Othello enters. And Desdemona immediately says, my dear Othello, because she loves him. She's missed him. She's been worried about him. He's been away leading soldiers in order to fight off this incursion from the Ottoman Empire. And Othello says, it gives me great wonder as my content to see you before me, my soul's joy. He has all these pet names for her. He really, really loves her. And he also says, later on in about 183, if it were now to die, 'twere be to most happy. If I died right now, I would die happy just because I'm seeing you. And Desdemona says in line 188, our loves and comforts should increase even as our days do grow. Our love for each other is going to continue to grow over our lifetime. And Othello says, amen. I agree. Sweet powers. And so he calls Desdemona not the captain of his captaincy, sweet powers. He understands how much she loves him and how much he loves her. And he talks about having too much joy in seeing her. And then, unlike Cassio's social kiss of Desdemona, they kiss. And unlike Iago's talking about how his wife should give Cassio a little bit more tongue, which is a double entendre, right? A French kiss, which people have been doing forever, not just the French. But she speaks too much. They kiss for real here. A kiss that shows them unified as one. And then Iago tells the audience, "Oh, you are well tuned now, but I'll set down the pages that make this music as honest as I am. So you're all aroused right now with your wife, but I'm the one who's writing these pages. I'm the one who is writing the music, and I am going to make you dance to my music." And Othello tells his wife, "Let us to the castle. Let's go back." Why? Because they are newlyweds, right? And he exits, and then we have only Iago and Rodrigo, his stooge, on the stage. And Iago is going to tell Rodrigo what his plan is. In a way, what he's going to do instead is inflame Rodrigo's jealousy. And he tells him, "Hey, meet me out by the dock. If you're valiant, as they say that even like low men are when they are in love, and their natures have a nobility that is innate to them. Listen to me, listen to me. The lieutenant, meaning Cassio, tonight watches on the court of guard. First, I must tell thee this. So I'm going to give you this stuff. And by the way, Desdemona is directly in love with Cassio. There is no evidence of Desdemona, who is a newlywed bride, being in love with Cassio. Cassio is not in love with her either. He has his girlfriend that he pays. He is not trying to sleep with his general's wife. But Rodrigo, who has money, and as we talked in the in the first act, put money in thy purse, right? Rodrigo is in love with Desdemona, even though now she is newly married, and he wants to sleep with her, as does, of course, Iago. Desdemona is directly in love with him. With him, that's impossible. Lay thy finger thus. It's a nice way of saying, shut the hell up, I'm going to tell you. And let thy soul be instructed. Mark me with what violence she first loved the more, but for bragging and telling her fantastic lies. So she only fell in love with Othello because he told a good story. And she will love him still for saying the same things, prating. Let not thy discreet heart think it. Her eye must be fed. Okay. She has to have her eye candy. She has to have her lust and power. And what delight shall she have to look on the devil? So Othello now, according to Iago, again says that he is the devil. When the blood is made dual with the act of sport, and remember, sport, the act of sport, when she's tired of sleeping with him, of making love to him, but for Iago it's not making love, it's the act of sport. Can't you imagine if Iago was refereeing them in the bedroom? He shoots! He scores! I mean, it is. Iago takes the most beautiful and makes it the most base. And once she's made dual, she'll have to have a fresh appetite. And now he's describing Cassio in about line 218. Loveliness and favor, sympathy in years, meaning that Cassio is younger than Othello. Manners and beauties, all of which the Moor is defective in. Because Othello is not a young man. He's not a young man, and he doesn't walk around kissing people's hands and things like that. He's himself. He's already established himself. He doesn't have anything to gain by putting things on. But Iago is like, yeah, so he's defective. Now, for one of these required conveniences, her delicate tenderness will find it abuse. So, not only is Desdemona going to get sick of making love to her husband, she's going to be abused, and she's going to want to throw up. And she will begin to heave the gourds and disrelish and abhor the Moor. She'll be abused, she won't want to throw up, and she's going to hate her husband. Very nature will instruct her in it and compel her to, a second choice. And I have read studies where it's interesting, where women are interviewed and men are interviewed when they're in a relationship. And when women are asked if they have someone in mind in case the current relationship doesn't work out, they almost always do. And so this is Shakespeare observing humanity 400 years ago. And so she'll have to make a second choice. And now, sir, this granted, as it is a most pregnant and unforced position. So, he's just accused Othello of raping Desdemona, but now he's talking about the second choice being pregnant and unforced position. And of course he's selling the idea that even though she's in love with Cassio, which she's not, you could be the one who makes her pregnant in an unforced way. And then he goes on to talk about Cassio's qualities just to make Rodrigo jealous. Down in line 230, the knave is handsome, young, and he has all the requisites in him that folly and green minds look after. Unexperienced people are going to fall in love with him and want to be with him. A pestilent, complete knave, and the woman has found him already. So Desdemona has now become the woman who is already sleeping with Cassio. When has she had time to do that? As I recall, Cassio was out in the battlefield. I don't think there was time for that either. And as I recall, on their wedding night, her father was interrupting their wedding night. So there's no way that she has slept with Cassio. But Iago understands how to manipulate Rodrigo and his jealousy. And also, of course, we have to remember, get money off him so that he can continue to live in a style which he's accustomed. And Rodrigo says, I cannot believe that in her. She's full of most blessed condition. I don't believe what you're saying. But Iago says, blessed? Fig's end. The wine she drinks is made of grapes. If she had been blessed, she would have never loved the Moor. If she actually had the 7 virtues, she would never sleep with a black man. Blessed pudding! Did thou not see her paddle with the palm of his hand? Didn't you notice that? Didst not mark that? So now we're going to get into Iago doing finger lechery. And I don't know how many times you shook somebody's hand or waved hi to them or given them a fist. Were you ever committing some sort of lechery? Were you lustful with them by shaking a hand? But for Iago, that's how it's beautiful. Because the reason that handshakes ever started is for people to show that they were unarmed so that they could actually say, we're meeting in peace, even when there was a conflict. But Iago is saying that, that's the same as having sex with a person. And he says, lechery by hand. Sorry, lechery by this hand. Lechery by this hand. They met so near with their lips. Lechery by this hand, an index and obscure prologue to the history of lust and foul thoughts. They met so near with their lips, their breath embraced each other. So they were so close that even their breathing was having intercourse, apparently. Villainous thoughts, Rodrigo, when these mutualities so martial the way hard, when these mutualities martial hard, at hand comes the master and main exercise, the incorporate conclusion. Can you imagine how many times in the past week, and maybe with COVID you don't do this, but can you imagine if somebody was saying that just because you had talked to somebody, let's go pre-COVID, you talked to somebody and shook their hand, that you were committing lechery, one of the 7 deadly sins, which is lust, right? And that because you actually talked to somebody close enough where you smelled their breath, that meant you were having intercourse on the sly. This is ridiculous, but this is the world that this villain lives in. Pish, he says. He means be quiet again because he's talking. But sir, be you ruled by me. Iago wants everybody to be ruled by him. And Rodrigo, because he is so smitten, lustful, he's like, all right, do whatever you want as long as I can get what I want. Watch tonight for the command and I'll lay it upon you. Cassio doesn't know you. So this is as Iago being the director of the play. He doesn't know you. And I'll be nearby. Find an occasion to anger Cassio by speaking too loud or tainting his discipline or from another course. And Rodrigo's like, So he's saying, pick a fight with him. I'll be nearby, but is Iago ever going to put himself in danger? No, he's the puppet master. He is the director of this play. He's going to have somebody else fight his fight for him, even though there's no real fight against Cassio, except that Cassio became lieutenant and he did not. And Iago comforts Rodrigo, saying, Cassio is rash and very very sudden to anger, very sudden in choler. And he might hit you with his truncheon. Okay, you just imagine this. Hey, dude, I'm going to go pick a fight with this guy. And he might smack you in the head with a sword. You know, but what's a little brain damage between friends? Okay. And then he promises in line 256, by the discipline of Cassio, so shall you have a shorter journey to your desires. So, holding out lust to Rodrigo. You know, have a fight with him, and then you'll get what you want, which is Desdemona. And when I say what you want, Iago thinks of her as property. And Rodrigo's like, I will do this if you can bring it to any opportunity. That sounds like a good payoff. I'm going to go get beat up as long as I can get laid. And Iago says, I warrant thee, I promise thee, meet me by the citadel, I must fetch his necessaries as choice. Farewell. And so Rodrigo walks off the stage, and then we have an aside, even though it's not written in your book as an aside, there's no one else on the stage. Quiet, puppy, quiet, quiet. And so this aside is going to help reveal Iago's thought process to the audience. Okay, and he says, well, I think Cassio loves Desdemona. That Cassio loves her, I do well believe it. That she loves him, 'tis apt and of great credit. That just makes sense. The more, howbeit, that I endure him not, is of a constant, loving, noble nature. And I dare think he'll prove to Desdemona a most dear husband. Okay, so he is basically vouching for Othello's honor, for his integrity, because he is a constant, loving, and noble nature, and he'll be a good husband. And then he confesses right here in line, let me see, well, that would be about 264. Now, I do love her too. Okay? Meaning that he loves Desdemona. But this is what we would call lust. He does not love Desdemona. If he loved her, he would want the best life for her. He lusts after her. And confusing these two things, throwing love on its head, and all that's good on its head is what Iago does best. And I love her, he says, which is great, once you have a liar. I love her not out of absolute lust, though peradventure I stand accounted for as great a sin, or maybe I do, but partly led to die at my revenge. I love her, I lust her, because I want to get revenge. Can you ever imagine having a relationship or someone saying, I love you because I want to get my revenge by using you? For I suspect a lusty more. So now we have again him going back to this fantasy he's created for himself, where he's revealing himself, that the lusty more hath leapt into my seat. So, the thought thereof does like a poisonous mineral gnaw my inwards. Okay. There is so much wrong with what he just said. First, we have the lusty Moor, the man who's full of lust, when it's Iago who has lust for power, and Iago who has lust for sex, and lust for control. And he's accusing Othello of leaping into his seat, which he owns his wife's vagina. Okay, this is the same phrase, well, same concept as when he accused Othello in Act 1 of performing his office, his duties. Now, can you imagine describing anybody's body as a seat? And so he's going to go on to say that he needs revenge by sleeping with Desdemona if possible. So on page 606 or line 271, nothing shall content my soul till I am evened with him, wife for wife. So you've probably met people who have done this, where they have revenge infidelity. Oh, you had an affair? Well, now I'm going to. And they stay married. It's amazing. It's so toxic. All right? Tit for tat. So he's talking about wife for wife. Or if I can't, or failing so, yet that I put the Moor at least in jealousy. If I can't sleep with his wife, I will put himself in jealousy so strong that judgment cannot cure it. Which thing to do if this poor trash of Venice, whom I trash, so now Othello is poor trash. Which is a totally classist thing to say. And why would he say that? Because, Othello is a general with great respect, reputation, and he happens to be wealthy. Oh, and black. So he's poor trash anyway. I don't know about you all, but calling people white trash, calling people trash, anytime is a heads up to about the person who is saying those words. This is a terrible thing to say. But he's going to go on to trash him, meaning to trash his reputation or to destroy him. For his quick hunting, stand the pudding on. This is what I'm going to do, Iago is saying. I will have Michael Cassio on the hip, meaning that I will control Cassio. I will abuse him to the Moor, meaning he's going to badmouth him to Othello. And then on top of that, after I've destroyed Othello's life, I will make the Moor thank me, love me, and reward me for making him egregiously an ass. So, I met a man who was a Marine in Okinawa who went to a bar and he was drinking a lot and he got into a bar fight. And each time the Japanese person hit him in the face, he only knew one word of Japanese, which was, the word he knew was arigato, which meant thank you. And so each time the guy hit him, he said thank you. And since he said thank you, the guy kept hitting him again and again. Arigato, arigato, Origato. Same thing right here. That Iago wants to betray, to make Othello an ass, and at the same time have him love him, thank him, and reward him. And I will practice upon his peace and quiet even to madness. And madness at this time in Western literature means insanity. And so now we know, in case we didn't suspect it in the first act, exactly where Iago is coming from. He wants to be thanked. Can you imagine if someone has used you and abused you and you're like, well, thank you, I love you, here, can I give you something else? Not like this man I met who got the crap beat out of him in an Okinawa bar. Origato. I will see you next time for the mini act, which is Act 2 is Scene 2 of Act 2, and then the major scene, which is Scene 3, and we'll find out what happens. Thank you.